Clemson keeps their momentum going. They picked up their third straight win, beating North Carolina 31-21, and they'll go for their eighth win at Columbia, at South Carolina, at 7:30 on the SEC Network. Obviously, that's the game we've been waiting for a year as they look to get revenge. Before I dive into that, just a few quick things on some other games, namely the win over North Carolina. Like I said, 31-21. I thought the defense was excellent. That is a truly elite offense. Drake May will be a top 5 NFL draft pick. And he struggled. He carried them as much as he could, but he was only 16 of 36, 209 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. You could tell that he's excellent, but Clemson's defense was better. Nate Wiggins versus Tez Walker was a huge matchup to watch. And Tez Walker is excellent, and I thought he played well. He had 70 yards, but he was averaging 100 yards and a touchdown even coming into the game through 6 games, because remember, he missed the early part of the season with eligibility issues from his transfer. And he was held below that. Nate Wiggins got a pick. I believe he was the one targeted on that play. Nate Wiggins also forced a fumble on the running back, Hampton. I thought Wiggins looked like a first-round draft pick. I expect him to leave after the season and to go in the first round. And Clemson's really cornerback you. It's their best position. I think Mike Reed is, with all respect to Nick Easton, who I also think is excellent, I think Mike Reed's Clemson's best position coach. I think you can argue he's the best coach on the staff, obviously not counting Coach Sweeney. I think Mike Reed's awesome, and he is just doing work with the cornerbacks. Wiggins is just the latest of these stars. Avion Terrell was also awesome. He's a freshman. He's coming on. He could start next year. He's going to challenge Toriano Pride. He's going to challenge Jaden Lucas. And, of course, you got Shelton Lewis too. So love that position and the outlook for it moving forward. Amarian Hampton, big game for him. They ran the ball quite well. He had 178 yards and 2 touchdowns, but he also lost 2 fumbles. One, at the goal line, it was a touchback. For Clemson, they ran the ball fairly well. I thought Shipley was, I don't know if explosive is the word, but he was shifty and dangerous, made a lot of guys miss. He had a 33-yard run. He had 126 total yards. He had a touchdown average, 7 yards carry. I thought he played very well, except he had another fumble, another red zone fumble. It's really frustrating, and I don't know. I think that what would be an unbelievable game to me is tainted, obviously. So good game, but not. He's got to clean that up. What's interesting is he ran down the hill with the seniors. He's obviously a junior. I don't know if that's he thinks he's going to be an early draft pick, and if it doesn't really take running backs that early. Even ETN went first pick of the second round, and you'd think Shipley's several rounds behind ETN or where ETN was. So I don't know if he'll transfer to a Michigan where they're just going to pound the rock and have an elite offensive line, or if he's going to go and he's okay being a 4th, 5th, or 6th round pick. And you still make tons of money, so that's certainly fine. He had the concussion issue, so maybe it makes sense. I love Clemson's stable of running backs with Phil Maffa. They've got Jay Haynes already there, and then they got David Ajamame coming in. So I think it's fine if he does choose to go. I'd wish the best for him regardless. But I thought it was interesting. An interesting note that he ran down the hill with the seniors. Other things of note: Troy Stellato, 6 catches. He's got great hands. I'm a huge Troy Stellato fan. And Adam Randall put together a nice day, which is nice to see. He's kind of had a disappointing year. He had 2 catches for 57 yards, including a 31-yarder. So just always happy for him when he kind of pops like that. A few thoughts on Cade. He ended up going over 200 yards. And having a pretty good stat line of 21 for 32, 6.8 yards per attempt. That's 219 yards, and he had a touchdown, no picks, no fumbles or anything. So, a good day. But watching him, you could still tell he makes kind of freshman mistakes. He had a pick, but he was very fortunate that it was called back on not a bad call, but a kind of borderline roughing the passer call. And then at the end of the half, he made a mistake, and I didn't see anyone open and took off. It was 3rd down. There's no timeout, so they couldn't spike it because it would have been 4th, and the clock would have expired without a field goal. And he was down right at the goal line. It was very hard to tell. I didn't think he was in. Upon replay, it was maybe in. Luckily, they called him in and didn't have enough to overturn it. So it worked out, but obviously not a very prudent decision. And asked about it after the game, he said, I've got to learn from that. Obviously, have to either throw a complete or incomplete ball there, can't run it. So he knows and he's learning from it. And I find it encouraging that he's athletic enough to, make a dumb mistake, but turn it into a touchdown, but also humble enough to see that even though it did work out, doesn't mean it was the right decision. So I like his attitude. I love that he's learning. He's a guy that is very fun to cheer for and easy to cheer for. So that's encouraging. We'll need to see him kind of take those steps for next season. All right, one other thing before I flip it over to the Palmetto Bowl. Clemson basketball is really, really good. Not only did they win the Asheville Championship, they picked up a blowout win, 85-68 over a Boise State team that's been in the tournament 2 years in a row. Brought back a lot of veterans, a lot of good post players. They were tough in the first half, but Joe Girard kind of went off. They went off, especially in the second half, knocking down some pretty tough three-pointers and also getting to the basket. He had 3 assists, good ball distributor. He's really come on. He had 9 points in the first 2 games, and then he's had 40 in the last 2 games. So he's averaging over 12 now. You'll probably see that continue to climb closer to 15, 16, 17 points. Really encouraging. I don't want to say worried. I was just on the verge of starting to get worried halfway through that third game when he really started picking up the pace. So great to see him lead all scores with 23 points. He was 3 for 6 from 3. Really encouraging. Another guy who continues to just give really positive signs, RJ Godfrey off the bench. He's built like a football player, and he just goes up and gets rebounds. He had 4 block shots, really physical guy. As he kind of gets more comfortable in his body and gets smoother, he's going to get even better. He's only a sophomore. A friend of mine said he reminds him of James Mays, and I think that's right on. I think he's James Mays, but he's still got time to get more fluid. He reminds me of a kind of an older James Mays, and he's only a sophomore, Godfrey. So that's really encouraging. Chase Hunter and PJ Hall each had 14. They're steady. They're probably the best players on the team. But now when you're getting contributions from these other guys, this is a deep team. This is a great offensive team, probably the best offensive and the deepest team Brownell's ever had. I think this is a team that should win at least if not multiple games in the NCAA tournament. Maybe I'm ready to be hurt and let down because that's the typical for Clemson basketball. But I really believe in this team. And if you haven't jumped in yet, they're about to start their toughest stretch against teams like Alabama on the road, TCU, Memphis on the road, South Carolina, who's actually much better this year at home. So they've got some big games coming up. They don't need to win them all, luckily, because they're a good start, undefeated start. But they do need to hold serve against some of them. This is their chance to pick up some big non-conference wins, something they didn't really do last season. All right, Palmetto Bowl. So biggest game of the year, obviously. Last year they lost the game, makes this even bigger. So just kind of analyzing it, I'm going to have another full video with a guest to break this game down. But first, just a couple of my thoughts on this game. First of all, if you are not subscribed to this channel, please do so. If you are, I appreciate you. I want to say thank you, and please like this video. All right, let's dive in. So Clemson, more so lately, but they are fairly balanced running versus passing. They run it 51.2% of the time, and we're seeing that get higher and higher. So I would expect maybe even more, a little, slightly run heavy against South Carolina. The Cocks are very pass heavy, towards the bottom in run percentage at only 44.5%. Usually don't see teams be quite that pass heavy. They don't run it much because their offensive line doesn't really allow them. They get behind the chains when they do it. I think Mario Anderson's a good running back, actually, pretty explosive. He's got the big playability. In the last couple games against Kentucky, he didn't do much. He only had 21 yards, which again speaks to why they don't run it that much. His long was only 11 in that game. But against Vanderbilt, he had a 72-yard run. Against Jacksonville State, a 40-yard run. Texas A&M, he had a 29-yard run. Mizzou only a 17 for his long. And then Florida was a 30-yard run, and Tennessee a 75-yard run. So he breaks off these big ones, and his stat line looks good overall. He's averaging 5.2 yards per carry, but it's really because he gets one really big play, maybe 2 out of 3 games, something like that, and it skews the numbers. From a success rate perspective, it's not good. It doesn't keep them on schedule, and that's why they get away from it. So that's going to be a big problem for them. They have some advantages, though, if we're being honest. The Cocks definitely have some advantages in this game. I think the main one is a pretty obvious one. It's their passing game. Gamecocks are 15th nationally with 291.1 yards per game passing. Clemson's only 55th at 236.8 yards. So about a 55-yard advantage per game for the Gamecocks passing the ball. Rattler's really good. Let me read you some of these stats. Spencer Rattler has 3,074 passing yards on the season with 17 touchdowns to 9 picks. Cade Klubnik, more than 500 fewer yards at 2,480. So what's that, like 600 fewer? I mean, that's a good bit to be behind. 19 touchdowns, 7 picks, so a little bit better on the ratio there. But Rattler is a good quarterback. He could really carry the team. They do have a top flight wide receiver, kind of the outside, go up and get it kind of guy that for years we've talked about Clemson needing. They have Xavier Leggett, 6'3", outside receiver, a senior. He's got 1,187 yards, 7 touchdowns, averaging 18.3 yards per catch. He had 94 yards and 2 touchdowns against Kentucky. That's a big difference maker. And before the season when we were previewing it, I put out a question to Clemson fans: would Clemson have a 1,000-yard receiver? A couple people said Adam Randall. Most people thought it would be Bo Collins. They kind of thought that's what he would do. And he's been fine, but he's not really that deep threat. Doesn't really have the speed or the jump ball ability to kind of do that. And now he's been good, but now he might not play in this game. He had a plantar fascia injury, so they say he's day-to-day. I don't know if he'll play. It sounds like Antonio Williams will also be out. So I think you look at the passing games, that's probably the biggest advantage South Carolina has in this one. Clemson will be without Collins, Antonio Williams. Those are likely not for sure. And then Cole Turner, of course, was lost early in the year. He's out for the year. Those are the 3 guys I expected to be Clemson's 3 best receivers, and they're all out. So they're going to have to put it together with freshman Tyler Brown, with Troy Stellato, and just kind of figure it out. And that's going to be tough. We'll need Brenning Stool to come through, and, of course, the running game. The other area where South Carolina has a pretty clear advantage is a kicker. Mitch Jeter is 12 for 14 for an 86-yard field goal percentage, whereas Jonathan White's is only 8 for 14 for only a 57% field goal percentage. So pretty clear advantage of kicker too, and then the passing game. Now Clemson, I think, has the biggest advantage of all in this game, and it's on defense. Clemson's defense is excellent. They're 10th nationally in total defense, allowing just 288 yards per game, whereas South Carolina is 96th. So 10th versus 96th in total defense. They allow 402.6 yards per game. So just absolutely paltry. The points per game difference isn't as big because of some of the bad positions Clemson's offense has put the Tiger defense in. But even still, they're 37th at basically 22 points per game as compared to the Cox at 28 points per game. So only 6-point difference there. It kind of hides it, though. South Carolina really lets teams go up and down the field, where Clemson's defense really does not. I think that's the biggest mismatch. I think you're saying who's the best unit? It's Clemson's defense. Who's the worst unit? It's the Cox defense. And then you figure out the offenses in between. So I think that's I think that's the biggest advantage either team has, and it's in favor of Clemson. The other big advantage Clemson has is in the rushing game. They haven't been excellent all season, and the offensive line has been very inconsistent. So I will caveat it with that. They're averaging 4.4 yards per carry, which isn't great, but they're still averaging 177. They're averaging 177 yards per game on the ground. That's 42nd nationally, and they've been much better lately. And then when you compare that to South Carolina, 2.8 yards per carry, they're only averaging 87.6 rushing yards per game. I mean, that's just terrible. Only Akron, Wazoo, Colorado, and Hawaii are worse. So Washington State and Colorado, the only Power 5 teams with fewer rushing yards per game. So just abysmal on the ground. If they don't break out a long one, they're basically not going to run the ball effectively. And I think that puts just a ton of pressure on Rattler. And again, Rattler's good, and he's got Xavier Leggett. So it's possible, they could carry the team to win. And that's what they do. That's how they've won 5 games, and that's why they're going for a potential 6th and bowl qualifying win against Clemson. That's also what they did last year when Rattler threw for 360. But that's a lot of pressure to put on that one aspect of their game. Clemson's running game has been better lately. They've averaged 228 rushing yards per game over the last 3 games. If they had done that all season, that would put them 5th nationally behind just UCF and West Virginia in terms of Power 5 teams. So if they keep the pace they've been doing lately, they're very, very good rushing offense. On the season as a whole, they've struggled. The offensive line's been wildly inconsistent. And frankly, if you act like you know what you're going to get, you're lying to yourself. It's a total crapshoot every week. Clemson I would not be at all surprised if Clemson completely bullied them and ran the ball down their throat. I would also not be at all surprised if Clemson struggled to run the ball, because that's how it's been all year. So South Carolina, I think, at home, obviously adds another layer of challenge there, but I think Clemson's the better team. They're playing better football right now. South Carolina has only beat 2 Power 5 teams, and one of them is Vanderbilt. They barely beat Kentucky. That's their other one. Clemson is playing pretty good football, beat a North Carolina team that started the season beating South Carolina. Of course, North Carolina was a better team then, it seems like, but nonetheless, that's a common opponent who Clemson beat. So I feel pretty good about this. Now, you don't know what to expect with this Clemson team. There's a lot more to discuss. Like I said, I'm gonna have a guest on in the next day or two, and we're gonna talk about this game more, get his thoughts. But I think with Clemson's defense, I think with the advantage in the run game, it's just putting a lot on Rattler and Leggett, and they're very good. They're capable. This is not a slam dunk win, but I feel pretty good about Clemson winning. I feel better about this one than I did about Notre Dame for sure. Better about this one than I did about North Carolina. So I'll reserve the right to change my mind here in the next couple of days, but I plan to pick Clemson. I feel pretty good about it. So we'll dive into this one more. But with that, with such a big game looming, wanted to jump in and talk about it a little bit. I hope you enjoyed. Thanks, and go Tigers.